Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar. My name is Bharat. I'm the head of product management at CyRAACS. With me, I have Deepti Bhatia, who is the practice head for product implementation and solutions consulting. Right? We have a very exciting webinar today that we want to talk to all of you about. And before we do that, just want to do a quick check with all of you. Is the audio and video good? If a couple of you can, just confirm that for us, that will be helpful. Okay, I think I can see people saying that you're able to hear us. So let's dive straight away into the topic of today's webinar, which is sustaining continuous compliance. Right. The objective of this webinar is to just simplify governance, simplify compliance, and help you govern effectively. So compliance has been around for ages, centuries. Right. It's the basis of a rules-based world order. Right. A simple example of compliance without even getting into cybersecurity is, all of us having to wear seat belts if you are driving a car, or if you are, seated in a car, or, wearing a helmet when we are on a, two-wheeler. That is the law of the land that has been set, and there is a traffic police department which actually expects you to do it. And if you violate that law, you have to pay fines. Right. That's the whole basis. But why is it there? It is not to hinder our driving experience or our journey. It is to ensure our safety. Right. There is no injury to us. There is no injury to any others who may be traveling on the road along with us, right? So the whole point of compliance is that it is existing to ensure there is a rules, there is effective governance, and as long as we are able to understand that and apply that effectively, life becomes very easier. Now, this is in general in life. Now, how does it translate to the world of business? Right, very simply, right, back in the day when rapid industrialization happened, compliances began to happen around people safety, the how you're managing labors, the working hours that you will have, the kind of environment that you will have for your employees, and so on and so forth. With the information age, let's say getting around say 1990, there has been an explosion of information. This has been aided by the technological advancements. So whether it is cloud adoption, virtualization, now AI, ML, there is a lot of things at stake with respect to information and the assets that are there. So compliances here today about cybersecurity and privacy are more focused on ensuring that organizations are safeguarding the assets as well as the information of the people that they have records of, right? So if you look at it very from an overarching perspective, there are a hell lot of regulations in the world, right? There are a lot of compliances in the world. About if you talk about BFSI, that's the most regulated industry in the world. So in India, you have the RBI ITGRC, you have the RBI CSF, you have SEBI CSCRF, you have IRDAI, right? In the US, you had the NYDFS, you had the SOX compliance, and so on and so forth. Talking about privacy, which has been, one of the most talked about things in the last 10 years. GDPR was, of course, a very hallmark regulation that came up in the world, wherein it focused on, the privacy of users. Then CCPA came about. Right. Recently in India, we had the DPDP Act being passed and the draft rules being circulated, and we're expecting that in this financial year these rules will come into actual play, and companies will have to go ahead and adhere to it. So if you look at it, there are a lot of compliances and regulations across the world, and the scrutiny is increasing. The complexity is increasing. What regulations and regulatory authorities are mandating is you can have a great business, go ahead and make money, but when it comes to privacy, when it comes to cybersecurity, you better have some things in place. Just like there is a traffic policeman who is looking out for any violations of the traffic laws, these regulators are also looking at any violations of compliance requirements by any company across the world. So what happens when there's a compliance failure? Right. So, as we put together this, it's just some of these instances in the last 2 years, one and a half years, in fact. Right. So just 2 days ago, Google was, fined by the state of Texas 1.375 billion. And for what? Because they were collecting personal data of users and utilizing it without consent. It was, hidden behind vague laws vague UI screens, and you did not know that this was actually happening, right? Similar challenges for Meta, wherein they had transferred the data of consumers from the European Union to North America without adequate protections, right? Similarly, TikTok. Now, there's a very big issue here in US, wherein the data is going to China, but again there's transparency that is missing about the data transfers. So if you look across globally, there are a lot of violations that have happened, and companies have been fined from millions to billions. Even closer home in India, WhatsApp was fined 25.4 million by the CCI for again violations of passing data to other Meta entities without transparency. So you will see that the regulator is coming hard on enterprises and companies, and these are big tech companies who are actually paying the penalties for compliance failures. So the realities of managing compliance are actually very different. So Deepti, why don't we just talk about the realities?
Sure. So with all these fines or the stats that we have seen, one thing that comes out is compliance is not easy. Now, there are issues, and an organization like Google and Meta, who are the technology innovators, who are the global leaders, they are caught into it. Everybody is impacted by it. Now, let's look at what are the challenges on a day-to-day basis that anybody would go through. First one, multiple standards. Now, taking an example of Google and Meta itself, being global leaders, they have to comply to global standard, global compliances, regulatory compliances, regional compliances. What is it creating? Standalone, multiple Excel sheets if you are doing it manually. You need multiple people managing those Excels. You need multiple workforce. You need segmented dashboards. Everybody needs a different view. There would be a human error that could be there in tracking all of this because you are going across so many manual activities over here. What is next? Control silos. Now, we talk about information security being everybody's responsibility. But in today's world, the world of governance, risk, and compliance, the responsibility lies on the InfoSec team, on the CISO. They have to do the heavy lifting over here of managing the compliances. They are the ones answerable, wherein it has to be everybody's responsibility. We don't have segregated or identified accountable roles and owners that are required for maintaining that compliance. There are different areas where people will have to come and contribute on those controls. There are failures that happen in those individual silos, business units, operations that are happening. There are siloed IT systems. There are independent systems that every business unit is using where there is no collaboration. So you do not get a single view on how your control is working. You do not have a view on how the control operates. There are communication gaps. What else? Static risk registers. Now, as a compliance activity, everybody today has an Excel sheet which is opened once in a year as an annual compliance tick mark, which lists down all our risks. But that is not reflecting what is the change in my current risk registers, current risk landscape. It is not showing how my control landscape is working, what is the impact of my risk exposure because of my control failures. I am not able to revise what are my critical risks because my visibility is not aligned with how my environment is operating now. There are failures. Risk ratings are not dynamic. So all these are challenges when you are looking at compliance from the risk perspective. Managing the non-compliances and exceptions that come from those. Now, I may have business dependencies, challenges that I may want to track, but I don't have a uniform board where I can go ahead and look at how my control failure or my exception is operating, how the treatment for those has to be. The visibility to all stakeholders on how we are progressing is not available in the environments in a manual process today. Audits. The most fearful word for a governance, risk, and compliance person. You have to go through nightmares to face an audit. Having multiple standards, multiple stakeholders that you need to manage. Everybody wants to know what is going on as part of the compliance requirements. The simple question to their answer is an audit, where an auditor will come and ask for multiple artifacts to you. But preparing for that is a nightmare. You have to burn the midnight oil to go scramble around, collate evidences from different areas, because there are multiple repositories that you are using, there are multiple SPOCs you have to coordinate with. You discover control failures during that preparation. You have no compensatory controls that are there. You want get an unwanted confusion. There is a heartburn. The CISO has a panic attack when all these are unraveled at that point in time. And of course, there is also a parameter of human error and effort that is going behind every audit. So what does all of this bring across to us? When we have these challenges, it is creating a chaos, it is creating a fragmented visibility, it is creating audit fatigue, it triggers ineffective governance, it is not reflecting my current risk posture. All these are challenges that everybody in their day-to-day life is facing.
I'm sure many in the audience are actually, nodding their head right now to say, yeah, I relate completely to this, right? If not all of this, at least one or more points, definitely, right? So it looks like, there is a lot of, complexities, and the realities are not easy. And, it seems like too much of an overhead. Why should we bother? Or, is there some simple way to actually do this? So before we even get there, right, I spoke about, how compliance is necessary. So any organization for which they feel that compliance is an overhead, they will always find they are playing the catch-up game, right? Compliance is not easy. They are, failing, and there are multiple things still to be fixed. But an organization which considers compliance as a moral obligation as part of doing business, they will always find the right practices and, scale it accordingly. So having said that, there is a simple framework on, actually putting this compliance in place and then sustaining it. And that's what we want to talk about next, right? So it's a very simple process, and it starts like always with a risk and control matrix, right? You go ahead and identify all your applicable risks and associated controls, right? The risk and associated controls, that's a very important thing. Determine your control requirements based on regulatory and contractual applications, as well as any standards that you want to adhere to. And then design your control environment and build your unique control set, right? So across all of this, you need to find out your unique control set and then map it to your, all the relevant applicable regulations and frameworks. So that becomes part of your unified compliance framework. So from risk to control, you have covered this journey to say you've built the risks, you've associated the controls, and you know where it is applicable for what regulation, right? Then comes the most important step, which will, actually save you a lot of time, which is managing this compliance. So go ahead and establish the control ownership for this. So Deepti spoke about, silos and there being communication gaps. Establish clear control ownership for all the controls that are there. Establish a compliance calendar, right? So that you're not actually doing this just before your audits, and effectively, just look at assessing your compliance periodically, whether it could be daily for something, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and so on and so forth. So when you assess your control effectiveness periodically, you can identify your compliance gaps proactively and remediate them on, much ahead of time. Now, all that is left for your audit readiness is then, just making sure you have the documents all in one place for that audit, and, everybody has access to it who needs to be part of that audit. And you also do a periodic self-audit, right? Or what is typically called as the internal audit. This is more to keep the hygiene and keeping the, the independence of that, people are aware that, what an audit is all about. Now, once you have this, audit is no longer a nightmare, and you actually pass your audit with flying colors, right? So then it's all about sustaining your compliance. So you just have to continue this journey, repeat these 5 points, keeping in mind that you have to scale your compliance as you grow, right? As your business grows, as you grow in geography, as you grow and in the number of people that you have, the number of businesses that you manage, all of that, scale your program. And as you mature, right? As you innovate and you add products, as you add services, also improve the maturity of your security program, right? So you improve the security, strength of controls of your security program, so that, it is aligning with what your risks are. With this framework, what you have is a very simple way to establish compliance and manage it on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. So Bharat, you touched upon a very important and a very powerful concept here of unified compliance framework.
Yeah.
Let's look into a very small example of how that will help solve our problems. We'll take an example of multi-factor authentication. Now, multi-factor authentication as a control from ISO 27001 says that access to all critical information systems, wherein PCI says access to all environments having cardholder data.
Yeah.
Wherein RBI says only for privileged users. Now, how to address these three different controls? We have a unified control. It says for every type of access across your environment, applications, tools, systems, networks. So you can put this as a common control. Define which are the systems that are impacted by it.
Yeah.
Define the frequencies for each of these systems impacted and monitor them those from there. And that will help you solve all your challenges on having multiple standards, multiple controls, multiple audits to answer and respond to. Let's take another example, a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. Again, ISO says that you should have a planned, documented, repeatable system for penetration testing.
Yeah.
PCI DSS goes and breaks it up into vulnerability assessments and penetration testing having different frequencies, where vulnerability scans should be done once in 3 months. Penetration testing can be done once in 12 months. RBI also follows a similar example, says VA should be done at least once in 6 months and PT should be done in 12 months. Now, a unified control, which says that we define a regular planned vulnerability assessment and conduct the penetration testing annually, will help solve the problem and will help us comply to all these compliance requirements. So, managing the control, managing the frequency is addressing all your challenges in terms of having multiple standards, audits, silos, all of these come together. What do you think, Bharat?
Yeah, so a unified control framework, when you build it and you're able to tailor it to what applies for your environment, you will suddenly find that a single control addresses all your regulation standards and framework. So you then are just looking at that specific system for what that control and that standard requires, and you're able to just carve it out and provide it at the time of audit. And more importantly, you are always assured of how your compliance is for each of them. You're not worried about it the day before the audit or the week before the audit. So this as a practice can help organizations build a very simple and seamless program. So while we're talking about all of this, is it easy to do all of this in just Excel sheets and in over chat and other things? No, obviously no. So there are GRC platforms that are available, but you have to choose the right platform to go ahead and address these challenges for you. So Deepti spoke about the challenges that are there, right? So multiple standards, control silos, static risks, and all of this, right? So with all of this chaos and fragmented visibility, what you actually should be looking at for, when you're selecting a platform is a unified control framework, right? How strong is it? How robust is it that it can assimilate all of your requirements and provide it in a simple, clear language for your control owner just to deliver that? Right? A continuous compliance workflow. So nothing but your calendar, but it allows you to configure the workflow in a way that it addresses the varied environment that you have. And then integrated risk management. Your controls and risk not being associated means you are not having the complete visibility. A control is failing, but nobody has any idea of the impact of it because you're not correspondingly looking at how the risks are getting elevated. And finally, if you're not tracking all your control failures and any exceptions that you're given for business requirements, then your program is centering around a single failure point, which you will definitely discover in your audits when you're looking at sample data, right? So the audit readiness piece is the last piece that is required for this, because it then helps you prepare for the audit very simply by just pulling out data for a period that you need to, for the controls that are in scope, for the standard that you're getting audited for. And the auditor just has to look at this and maybe just ask questions around your framework, the intent, and your audit is a breeze, right? So this is what a GRC platform should minimum have. I know there are platforms that have many more things, and there are things that are built as great capabilities, but this minimum is what helps companies address the compliance headache that they have. And happy to say that our platform, which is Compass, is actually built on these fundamental principles to say that how does this work and enable organizations to manage compliance seamlessly, right? So we have our own proprietary unified control framework, right? For which we have written controls ourselves and mapped it to global standards and regulations. We have configurable workflows which helps you, manage your program in the way that you want, assigning it to the different owners and, making sure that they are compliant to it. And of course, we spoke about integrated risk management. So without a doubt, Compass has that, which it shows you the elevated risk ratings, because of control failures. And we have our own issues and exceptions management, product on that, which captures all your control failures, compliance gaps, and, your areas of improvement in one place, and you can track it. And all of this is essentially what helps you become, audit ready whenever there's an audit go happens, right? So with that, we just want to, that's what we had in terms of, simplifying compliance and, telling you what effective governance can look at. We just want to now open the floor for the Q&A. So let's look at what questions we have. Okay, I think we have quite a few questions coming on. So the first one is from Archana, right? So this is related to how can I leverage continuous compliance to manage compliance accurately and with minimal overhead? So yeah, I think we spoke about the framework that was there, right? So that's the framework that you need to adopt, starting from your risk and control metrics, verifying that all of these controls are implemented, and then you have an integrated dashboard for risk and control, which then tells you at any point in time if there are variations, if there are deviations, what is at risk for you, and then what's the impact to your posture. That is the simplest way to actually run this as a program.
Yeah. Let's take the next one.
Yeah.
How do you measure the effectiveness of a simplified compliance program without solely relying on audit results? A very good question. So that's the base of your continuous compliance over here, wherein you look at the artifacts, you look at the reports, you look at how the control is operating over a period of time, and you define what is the compliance or non-compliance across on that control as well. Over a view, you will get a graph which will show how my control is performing.
Cool. We have one more question, which is, does continuous compliance significantly increase cost compared to traditional methods? Not really. Initially, you might look at it as, you are having additional costs, but as you see the larger picture, when you have the program in place and you are monitoring this continuously, you will find that the returns on this will be much more significant than the initial cost that you had to invest, right? So like Deepti mentioned, it's how your compliance is improving. It's also the audits that you are effectively handling. And then, you are also seeing how the product, in terms of you scaling up, right? Your program is also able to scale up accordingly. So that's the real return on investment that you get when your services and products are, scaling up as part of your business growth. And the program is ready to support that.
Let's take one last question,
Sure.
Bharat. What are the challenges or risks associated with using AI in cybersecurity compliance? So again, it's a very good question. AI right now is helping us identify risks. It is helping us manage our compliances more effectively, but it also brings its own set of risks over here. Now, identifying what the risks are, acknowledging those risks, and making sure you have the same security controls that are aligned for AI to protect your information, protecting your models, your data sets, etc. That's how you will be able to preserve your risk or reduce your risk exposure over there for the AI perspective as well.
Cool. So this was, let's look at the chat if there are any more questions.
Yeah, quite a few over here.
Okay, there's one more. Hi, in a scenario where I know what requirements are applicable to our organization, but not sure how to get on board. How to get on board on Compass. So this is specific to Compass. What are steps that you can undertake to help us get compliant? Okay, yeah, this is easy, right? So as I said, we have the framework on which we built Compass. So let's say we understand what your organization needs and what your specific needs on cybersecurity and privacy are. We can then build this compliance program for you, including the compliance calendar on Compass, as to how the controls are being measured, what is the frequency of all of them, what risks are applicable to you, and then set it up for you so that you can then run it on your own. You do not need us beyond the initial incubation period of a couple of months, and then you are good to go, just sustaining this. And in case you ever need support on specific troubleshooting, the team is available for you to provide that. Right. One more question.
So one more is there. How management commitment is important to maintain the continuous improvement in corrective actions, where a vision and strategy and a support is definitely required. It starts from the top. The vision of being a security-driven organization is what fuels the compliance requirements. It's what fuels the requirements. It also gives a trajectory on how we are growing. So definitely that's an important aspect that we would want to cover with seeing across Google, Meta, and all those names over there. Definitely that's the trend, and that's how we see that we have majority CEOs also thinking in that direction, looking at security and looking at compliances as core part of their business operations today.
Just want to add, because that's such an interesting question, because it's speaking more about continuous compliance, right? So initially there could be resistance in terms of the organization's culture, and that's why what Deepti mentioned, that it has to start from the top, to say that how this will actually save us time, effort, and the madness. We avoid the madness during an audit, or whenever we have to actually see that how our program is, right? So typically with security, how well do you know that what your program is? It's either during an audit or when there is a breach. So as long as you don't have a breach and you've not had any of the issues that other competitors, other peers in the industry are having, and you're able to breeze through your audits very seamlessly, that you've got that. And when the organization is able to show this to everybody, saying that this is what we will be accomplishing by you putting this effort every day, every week, right? That sets the tone for the acceptance of that culture, and then the program becomes a success, right? I think that's the last of the questions that we had. Quite a few questions that are repetitive. So with that, we will just want to say thank you for joining this session today. We hope it was useful and you had a lot of takeaways. We will be conducting more of these sessions for you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.